Did medieval women just sit around feeling glum? Were their lives a non-stop parade of sighs and sorrow in the Middle Ages? Prepare to unravel some long-held assumptions about where women in the Middle Ages found their true moments of brightness and laughter. Number 5. The myth of the gloomy hermitas. Women were perpetually somber and isolated, experiencing no personal joy. So picture this, you are whisked back to the Middle Ages, and what often comes to mind? Maybe a solemn veiled woman quietly toiling away, her face a mask of endless patience or sorrow. This idea that medieval women were mostly quiet, somber figures, cut off from real joy and connections, has stubbornly stuck around. It is a powerful image, one that suggests their lives were simply too hard, too full of burdens, to allow for much personal happiness or social fun. This image paints a world where women rarely laughed, seldom shared lighthearted moments, and were largely isolated from each other or their communities in any joyful way. It is almost as if the very idea of a medieval woman experiencing simple, unrestrained delight is a surprise. The notion holds that if they felt joy at all, it was a rare, fleeting flicker quickly overshadowed by the serious demands of their existence. Their world was supposedly too rigid, their roles too fixed, for any real personal cheerfulness to break through. It suggests that medieval women were so overwhelmed by the daily grind, by the strict rules of their society, and by the ever-present threat of illness or hardship, that their emotional lives were largely flat, devoid of the vibrant peaks and troughs that define human experience. They were often portrayed as resigned, rather than joyful figures. But what if the actual records, the scraps of evidence, the stories and fragments of their lives tell a different tale? What if medieval women, just like people in any era, found countless ways to express happiness, to connect with others, and to experience genuine personal joy? Look closely at the surviving documents, the letters, the poems, even the marginal illustrations in old manuscripts, and a more vibrant picture begins to emerge. Women, both noble and common, were active participants in their communities. They were not always confined to the silent corners of their homes. They engaged in daily life with a range of emotions, including profound happiness. Consider the simple yet powerful acts of social bonding. Women from all walks of life formed strong friendships. Noble women exchanged letters filled with news, gossip, and genuine affection, sharing their hopes and their troubles, finding solace and joy in these trusted connections. They discuss fashion, family matters, and sometimes even political intrigue, often adding personal touches and jokes that show a clear capacity for lightheartedness. A letter from an English noblewoman, Lady Elizabeth de Burgh, to her sister-in-law reflects a close bond and shared interests, suggesting that their correspondence was a source of pleasure and connection across distances. These were not just formal exchanges, they were lifelines of friendship. In villages and towns, women gathered to work together, whether it was spinning wool, grinding grain, or harvesting crops. These communal tasks were not silent, joyless labors. They were often accompanied by singing, storytelling, and lively conversation. The laughter would have echoed through the fields during harvest, as women shared jokes and tales while binding sheaves of wheat. Imagine the chatter and camaraderie around a communal oven where women brought their dough to bake, sharing recipes and family news. These moments of shared labor were also moments of shared life, of connection, and of finding lightness amidst hard work. They found joy in the simple act of being together, creating a sense of community and mutual support. The collective energy of these shared tasks could often turn a chore into an opportunity for social interaction and even fun. Family life, too, was a significant source of joy. While medieval families faced hardships, they were also deeply affectionate. Mothers cherished their children. Fathers, despite popular caricatures, often played active roles in their children's upbringing, and sibling bonds were strong. Surviving lullabies and children's toys hint at the tender moments shared within families. A letter from a mother to her absent son might express longing, but also pride and affection, revealing a deep well of maternal joy. The letters of Duoda, a 9th century Carolingian noblewoman, to her son William reveal an intensely personal and loving relationship, filled with spiritual guidance but also profound motherly concern and affection, a clear indication of the deep joy she found in her child, even when separated. These were not cold, distant relationships, but ones warmed by love and the shared experiences of family life. Weddings, baptisms, and feast days were major family celebrations, bringing together relatives from far and wide, filled with music, dancing, and abundant food. These occasions were bursts of collective joy, reinforcing family ties and creating lasting happy memories. Music and dance were central to medieval life for all people, women included. From the refined court dances of noble ladies to the lively folk dances of villagers, these activities provided immense personal and communal joy. Medieval illuminations, those vibrant pictures in old books, often show women playing instruments like harps, lutes, and flutes, or dancing with gusto at feasts and celebrations. These depictions are not of stoic figures. They are often animated, showing joyful expressions and dynamic movement. The songs they sang, whether devotional or secular, were expressions of human emotion, including happiness, love, and lightheartedness. A troubadour song might capture the delight of a woman in love, or a simple folk tune might celebrate the beauty of spring or the bounty of a harvest. These musical expressions were not just entertainment, they were vital parts of the emotional landscape, allowing for the public and private expression of joy. Her religious life, for many women, was also a source of deep personal joy, not solemn asceticism. Nuns found profound spiritual happiness in their devotion and the communal life of the convent. They formed close bonds with their fellow sisters, sharing daily routines, intellectual pursuits, and spiritual experiences. Their letters and writings often speak of the peace, fulfillment, and inner joy they found in their chosen path. The rule of Saint Benedict, which guided many monastic communities, emphasized mutual respect and care, fostering environments where women could thrive spiritually and emotionally. The joy found in contemplative prayer, in singing the divine office, or in performing acts of charity was a very real and significant aspect of their lives. A woman named Hildegard of Bingen, for example, a German abbess, writer, composer, philosopher, mystic, and polymath of the High Middle Ages, expressed profound spiritual joy and ecstatic visions in her detailed writings, often describing vibrant, colorful experiences of divine connection that clearly brought her immense personal fulfillment. Even in literature, though often written by men, there are glimpses of women's capacity for joy. The stories of Marie de France, one of the earliest known female French poets, in her collection of narrative poems known as the Lias, often depict women experiencing passionate love, cleverness, and sometimes finding happiness against the odds. While her tales often explore themes of constraint and struggle, they also portray moments of intense emotional connection and personal triumph, suggesting that joy, even if hard-won, was a part of the female experience she observed and imagined. These stories, though fictional, reflect an understanding of women as full emotional beings capable of great happiness. Furthermore, feasts and festivals were regular occurrences in the medieval calendar, and women were not just passive observers. They were active participants, preparing food, decorating, and joining in the singing, dancing, and games. A village feast marking a saint's day or a harvest celebration would have seen women, young and old, dressed in their best clothes, enjoying the music of pipers and drummers, perhaps participating in a lively round dance. These were communal explosions of joy, offering a respite from the daily routine and a chance to fully immerse in merriment. The sheer exuberance of these events, depicted in artworks and described in chronicles, leaves no doubt that they were potent sources of happiness for everyone, including women. The smells of roasting meat, the sounds of fiddles and flutes, the sight of brightly colored banners and costumes, all contributed to an atmosphere of collective delight. The image of the perpetually somber medieval woman is a stubborn one, but it misses a vital truth. Women in the Middle Ages, through their friendships, family bonds, communal activities, religious devotion, and participation in the vibrant cultural life of their time, found and expressed joy in countless ways. Their laughter echoed in homes, fields, and convents, a testament to their full and complex human experience, which was far from a constant state of gloom. Number 4. The bedchamber and beyond women's happiness was solely tied to marriage and motherhood, with no other avenues for fulfillment. There is a long-standing notion that for women in the Middle Ages, true happiness, meaning, and a sense of purpose could only be found within the confines of marriage and the role of motherhood. This idea suggests that a woman's entire identity and source of joy were wrapped up in her ability to bear children and manage a household, implying that without these specific roles, her life would be incomplete, empty, or simply devoid of real satisfaction. It paints a picture where the unmarried woman or the childless woman was somehow lesser, her life considered a tragedy or a void where joy ought to be. This viewpoint often overshadows any other potential paths to fulfillment for medieval women, making it seem as if their personal desires or ambitions outside of the domestic sphere were simply non-existent or irrelevant. It pushes a narrative that their joy was entirely prescribed by biological function and social expectation, leaving little room for individual choice or alternative sources of delight. However, a closer look at the diverse lives of medieval women reveals a much richer tapestry of experiences and a broader spectrum of joy. While marriage and motherhood were indeed highly valued and often brought immense happiness, they were far from the only routes to a fulfilling life. Medieval society, in its own complex ways, offered various pathways for women to find joy, purpose, and personal satisfaction outside of the domestic sphere, or to experience these even within it, but alongside other pursuits. Many women found profound joy and purpose in religious life. For some, entering a convent was a deliberate choice, a way to escape an unwanted marriage, to pursue intellectual interests, or to live a life dedicated to spiritual contemplation. Nuns were not just cloistered figures, isolated from the world, they were often highly educated women who ran large, complex institutions. They engaged in scholarship, illuminated manuscripts, composed music, and managed significant estates. The joy they found was not just spiritual, but also intellectual and communal. For example, Hilda of Whitby, an influential abbess in 7th century England, presided over a double monastery that became a renowned center of learning. Under her leadership, both men and women studied and contributed to intellectual life, finding deep satisfaction in their scholarly pursuits. For women like Hilda, the convent offered a path to leadership, intellectual engagement, and spiritual fulfillment that transcended the limited domestic roles often ascribed to women. Their happiness came from contributing to knowledge, nurturing spiritual growth, and leading thriving communities. Anchoresses, women who chose to live a life of solitary prayer, walled into a small cell attached to a church, also found profound spiritual joy. While their lives might seem restrictive from a modern perspective, for them it was a path to intense spiritual communion and inner peace. Julian of Norwich, a famous English anchoress, wrote profoundly about divine love and grace in her book, Revelations of Divine Love. Her writings reveal a deep spiritual ecstasy and a profound sense of God's unconditional love, which clearly brought her immense personal joy and fulfillment far beyond any societal expectations of marriage or motherhood. Her isolation was a chosen path to an inner world of profound happiness. Beyond religious life, women in urban centers found joy and purpose in various professions and trades. They were active participants in the economy, running businesses, working in guilds, and earning their own livelihoods. Women were brewers, bakers, weavers, innkeepers, mercers, and shopkeepers. They often managed their own financial affairs and contributed significantly to their families' incomes, or even supported themselves independently. For women involved in craft guilds, like the silk weavers of Paris or the linen workers of London, there was a sense of pride and accomplishment in their skilled labor. They found joy in the creation of beautiful and useful goods, in the camaraderie of their fellow craftswomen, and in the economic independence their work afforded them. A woman who successfully ran an inn, managed her own supply chain, and served a bustling clientele would undoubtedly have found satisfaction and pride in her work, a different kind of joy than that of a mother or wife. These were women who negotiated deals, managed apprentices, and paid taxes, demonstrating a level of agency and competence that surely brought them personal satisfaction. Widows, in particular, often gained significant independence and control over their lives and property. Many widows continued their deceased husbands' businesses, sometimes expanding them, and became powerful figures in their own right. They could manage their own estates, make their own legal decisions, and even choose whether or not to remarry. This newfound autonomy, while sometimes accompanied by grief, could also be a source of profound satisfaction and a different kind of freedom. A widow managing her late husband's shipping business or a substantial agricultural estate would have found joy in her competence, her financial security, and her ability to direct her own affairs. This independence was a precious thing, allowing for choices that were unavailable to many married women. Intellectual pursuits were another source of joy for some medieval women. While opportunities were often limited, particularly for women outside of monastic or noble circles, there were notable exceptions. Christine de Pizan, a late medieval writer, is a prime example. After being widowed, she supported herself and her children through her writing, becoming one of the first professional female authors in Europe. Her works, such as the Book of the City of Ladies, championed women's capabilities and argued for their intellectual equality. Christine's joy clearly came from her studies, her writing, and her fierce advocacy for women, demonstrating that intellectual and creative endeavors were powerful sources of fulfillment. She found deep satisfaction in crafting arguments and learning, and in using her voice to challenge the norms of her time. Her writing was not just a means of survival, but an expression of deep personal passion and joy. Even within marriage, a woman's joy was not solely tied to motherhood. marriages, though often arranged, could develop into affectionate partnerships. The spouses shared responsibilities, managed household affairs together, and supported each other. Letters between married couples sometimes revealed genuine love and companionship, indicating that the emotional bond itself was a source of happiness. The mutual respect and shared life within a successful marriage could be a profound source of joy, separate from the act of childbearing. Furthermore, women found joy in managing their households, overseeing servants, decorating their homes, and engaging in various domestic crafts like embroidery or weaving. These activities, often depicted in medieval art, could be sources of creative expression and personal satisfaction, bringing a sense of order and beauty to their immediate environment. The belief that medieval women's joy was singularly confined to marriage and motherhood overlooks a vast landscape of female experience. Women found happiness and purpose in spiritual devotion, in economic independence, in intellectual exploration, in creative pursuits, and in their chosen vocations, whether within a convent or a bustling town. Their lives were rich with diverse sources of fulfillment, challenging the narrow, stubbornly held idea that their happiness was a one-way street. Number 3, brains and Bibles. Women were considered inherently frivolous or simple-minded, incapable of deep intellectual or spiritual joy. There is a persistent and mistaken idea that medieval women were generally seen as intellectually inferior or emotionally shallow. This view suggests that they were thought to be less capable of complex thought, philosophical understanding, or profound spiritual experience, especially when compared to men. It implies that their minds were largely confined to domestic matters or superficial concerns, and that any joy they experienced was simple, unthinking, or purely emotional, rather than stemming from deep intellectual engagement or profound spiritual insight. This stubborn belief often portrays medieval women as figures primarily defined by their physical being and their roles as wives and mothers, leaving little room for an inner world of rich thought, sophisticated understanding, or deep spiritual connection. It suggests that the path to wisdom, scholarship, or true divine communion was largely closed to them, or that they simply lacked the capacity for such exalted experiences. However, the historical record offers a powerful counter-narrative, showing numerous examples of medieval women who were not only intellectually brilliant, but also experienced incredibly profound and ecstatic spiritual joy. These women challenged and broke through the intellectual and spiritual barriers of their time, leaving behind legacies that demonstrate their deep capacity for thought, learning, and divine communion. Their lives and writings reveal a vibrant inner world full of complex ideas, spiritual fervor, and moments of intense personal happiness derived from intellectual and spiritual pursuits. One of the most striking examples of a woman challenging the idea of female intellectual inferiority is Hildegard of Bingen, mentioned earlier. This German abbess was not just a mystic, she was a polymath of the 12th century. Her writings include theological works, moral treatises, medicinal texts, and even a unique language and musical compositions. Her spiritual visions, which she recorded in detail, were not simple emotional outbursts, but intricate, highly symbolic experiences that she interpreted and explained with profound theological depth. She described these visions as bringing her immense spiritual ecstasy and a deep connection to the divine, a form of joy that was deeply intellectual and spiritual. She corresponded with popes, emperors, and kings, offering advice and insights, demonstrating that her intellect was respected and sought after by the most powerful figures of her day. Her joyful engagement with the world of knowledge and spirit utterly refutes the idea of women being simple-minded. Another powerful figure is Julian of Norwich, the 14th century English anchoress. Her Revelations of Divine Love is considered one of the earliest surviving books written by a woman in the English language. Her theological reflections are incredibly sophisticated, exploring concepts like God's unconditional love, sin, and redemption with remarkable originality and depth. Julian's spiritual insights brought her a profound sense of peace and joy, which she clearly articulates in her writings. Her intellectual journey was entirely intertwined with her spiritual one, demonstrating that women were capable of deep theological thought and experiencing profound, intellectually grounded spiritual happiness. Her writing is not just about personal feelings, but about wrestling with complex theological questions in a way that continues to resonate with readers centuries later. Catherine of Siena, a Dominican tertiary of the 14th century, was another woman who experienced intense spiritual joy and intellectual engagement. She was a mystic, activist, and reformer who advised popes and played a significant role in church politics. Her letters and mystical treatises are filled with theological arguments and passionate exhortations, showcasing a sharp intellect and a profound spiritual fervor. She dictated thousands of letters, demonstrating her formidable communication skills and her active participation in the intellectual and political life of her time, all driven by a powerful spiritual joy and conviction. Her spiritual insights were so compelling that she influenced major historical events, proving her mind was far from simple. Beyond these well-known mystics, many noblewomen were patrons of learning and literature, indicating their own intellectual interests. Eleanor of Aquitaine, one of the most powerful women of the 12th century, supported poets and scholars, fostering a vibrant court culture that valued intellectual pursuits. Her patronage suggests that she, and other women in her circle, found joy in the world of ideas, stories, and artistic creation. They were not merely passive listeners, but active participants in the intellectual currents of their time. The very act of commissioning and appreciating complex literary works or scientific texts shows a desire for intellectual engagement and the joy derived from it. Convents were often centers of female scholarship and learning. Nuns learned to read and write, studied Latin, copied manuscripts, and sometimes even composed their own works. Ratsvit of Gandersheim, a 10th century German canoness, wrote plays in Latin, demonstrating not only her mastery of classical learning but also her creative literary talent. Her works, often about female saints, show a clear intellectual curiosity and a desire to contribute to the cultural and intellectual landscape. The joy she found in crafting narratives and exploring moral themes in dramatic form is evident in her sophisticated writing. And even in Byzantium, far to the east, we find Anna Karenina, a 12th century princess and historian. Her Alexiad is an epic historical account of her father Emperor Alexios I Komnenos' reign, written with remarkable detail and an impressive grasp of military strategy, politics, and classical literature. Anna's work showcases a formidable intellect, rigorous scholarship, and a profound engagement with the political and historical events of her time. Her dedication to chronicling history and her obvious pleasure in intellectual pursuits stand in stark contrast to the idea of women as intellectually lacking. She found joy in her studies and in her ability to interpret the complex world around her. The presence of women as scribes and illuminators in monastic scriptoria further contradicts the simple-minded stereotype. These women painstakingly copied and decorated manuscripts, a task requiring great skill, precision, and literacy. Their work contributed to the preservation and dissemination of knowledge, a role that surely brought them a sense of purpose and intellectual satisfaction. The meticulous beauty of their work speaks volumes about their dedication and the joy they found in their craft. The stubbornly held belief that medieval women were intellectually simple or incapable of deep spiritual joy crumbles when faced with the evidence of women like Hildegard, Julian, Catherine, Ratsvit, and Anna. These women, and countless others whose names are lost to history, engaged with the profound questions of existence, pursued knowledge, and experienced spiritual ecstasies that defy any notion of their minds being limited or their joy being superficial. Their lives demonstrate a vibrant capacity for intellectual and spiritual happiness, challenging simplistic assumptions about female experience in the Middle Ages. Number 2, the homebody lie women were excluded from public festivities and social gatherings, having no joy in communal life. A common image associated with medieval women is one of confinement. This idea suggests that women were largely kept hidden away, strictly limited to the domestic sphere, and therefore had little to no involvement in public life, especially in joyful communal events. This belief implies that their social lives were restricted to the private world of the home, leaving them isolated from the vibrant pulse of their communities. It suggests that women were mere spectators or entirely absent from the lively feasts, the boisterous markets, the solemn religious processions, or the entertaining public performances that characterized medieval society. This stubborn notion paints a picture of a world where public joy was a masculine domain, with women relegated to the sidelines, their happiness found only in quiet, private moments, if at all. It strongly implies that they missed out on the collective laughter, the shared excitement, and the bonding experiences that come from participating in public gatherings. However, the reality of medieval life paints a very different picture. Women across all social classes were active and visible participants in a wide array of public festivities, social gatherings, and communal activities. Far from being excluded, their presence was essential to the fabric of medieval community life, and they found immense joy in these shared experiences. Their lives were interwoven with the public sphere in ways that allowed for significant social interaction and communal happiness. Feasts, whether noble banquets or village celebrations, were central to medieval social life, and women were integral to them. At a grand noble feast, noble women would preside alongside their husbands, dressed in fine clothes, enjoying the music of minstrels, watching entertainers, and engaging in lively conversation. They were not merely passive decorations, they were key figures observing and being observed, their presence contributing to the prestige and joy of the event. At a village feast marking a harvest or a saint's day, women would gather with their families and neighbors in the village square or churchyard. They would share food and drink, participate in dances like ring dances or carols, sing songs, and play games. These were moments of exuberant collective joy, where social barriers often softened and everyone, including women, could let loose and celebrate. The sheer noise and energy of these events, filled with laughter and merriment, would have been a stark contrast to any notion of quiet confinement. Flea markets were another vital public space where women were not only present, but often played a central role. From bustling town markets to local fairs, women were active as buyers and sellers. While peasant women would bring their produce, eggs, or spun wool to sell, engaging in lively haggling and social interaction. And urban women ran stalls selling a wide variety of goods, from bread and ale to textiles and spices. These were places of commerce, but also of intense social exchange. Women would meet friends, exchange gossip, hear news, and enjoy the vibrancy of the crowd. The sounds of vendors calling out their wares, the smells of various goods, and the constant flow of people would have created a stimulating environment where women found both economic opportunity and social enjoyment. The successful sale of goods, or the friendly banter with customers, surely brought a sense of satisfaction and daily joy. The religious processions and pilgrimages were significant public events that drew large numbers of women. Whether it was a local procession carrying relics through the streets, or a long journey to a distant shrine like Santiago de Compostela or Canterbury, women participated actively. These were not just acts of piety, but also significant social occasions. On pilgrimages, women traveled in groups, sharing stories, singing hymns, and supporting each other. The camaraderie on the road, the awe of visiting sacred sites, and the shared sense of purpose would have provided deep spiritual and communal joy. Medieval accounts often mention women travelers on pilgrimages, highlighting their active participation and the social benefits they derived from these journeys. The excitement of arriving at a revered destination, the shared devotion, and the sense of spiritual accomplishment undoubtedly brought immense joy. Public performances such as mystery plays and miracle plays, which were often performed in town squares or churchyards, attracted large audiences, including many women. These plays, often based on biblical stories or the lives of saints, were not just religious instruction but major social events, combining drama, spectacle, and often humor. Women would gather with their families and neighbors to watch these performances, enjoying the storytelling, the costumes, and the communal experience of entertainment. The shared laughter and emotional reactions created a strong sense of community and provided significant recreational joy. Even in the world of tournaments and courtly events, often thought of as male-dominated, women were prominent spectators and often central figures. Noblewomen would watch the jousts and melees, cheering on their favorites and participating in the social rituals of courtly love. Their presence added to the grandeur and significance of these events. The excitement of the competition, the pageantry, and the opportunity for social display would have been a source of enjoyment and social prestige for them. The vivid descriptions of these events and chronicles often emphasize the ladies' presence and their role in adding splendor to the proceedings. Communal work parties, especially during harvest or other agricultural seasons, also involve women working side by side with men and other women. While hard labor, these gatherings often transformed into festive occasions, complete with shared meals, music, and storytelling. The sense of collective effort and shared accomplishment, coupled with the opportunity for social interaction, infused these workdays with a distinct form of communal joy. They found satisfaction in their contribution and in the shared experience. The idea that medieval women were homebodies, largely excluded from public gatherings and communal joys, is a stubbornly held misconception. From feasting and dancing to market life, religious pilgrimages, and public performances, women were deeply embedded in the social and public life of the Middle Ages. They actively participated in the vibrant rhythms of their communities, finding laughter, connection, and immense personal joy in these shared experiences, challenging any notion of their lives being confined or joyless. Number 1. The puppet string delusion. Women had no control over their lives and therefore no capacity for self-determined joy or independent choice. There is a deeply entrenched and stubbornly held belief that medieval women were passive figures, largely devoid of agency and control over their own lives. This idea suggests that their destinies were entirely shaped by men fathers, husbands, brothers, or rulers, and that they had little to no capacity for making independent choices that would lead to personal joy or fulfillment. This perspective implies that women were mere pawns moved by external forces, unable to assert their will, pursue their own desires, or define their own happiness. It paints a picture of constant subservience, where the very concept of self-determined joy was an alien one for medieval women, as their lives were supposedly dictated by the rigid social structures and patriarchal norms of the era. This view often simplifies their existence into one of endless obligation and limited personal freedom, leaving no room for individual ambition or the joy that comes from making one's own way. However, a closer examination of historical evidence reveals a far more nuanced and dynamic reality. While medieval society undoubtedly presented challenges and limitations for women, many women, across various social strata, found remarkable ways to exercise agency, make significant choices, and thereby cultivate self-determined joy and lead lives of considerable personal fulfillment. They were not mere puppets, they were active agents navigating complex social landscapes, often with surprising degrees of autonomy and influence. One powerful example of women exercising agency comes from their ability to choose or refuse marriage. While arranged marriages were common, especially among the nobility, women sometimes had the option to resist an unwanted match. A noblewoman might, for instance, choose to enter a convent rather than marry a man she despised or who had a bad reputation. This choice, though sometimes pressured, represented a significant act of self-determination, allowing her to pursue a life of spiritual devotion and intellectual engagement, which could be a source of profound personal joy rather than a marriage that would bring misery. The choice to become a nun was often a conscious decision to gain a different kind of freedom and personal fulfillment. Widows, in particular, often wielded significant control over their lives and property. Upon their husband's death, many medieval widows inherited property, businesses, and even significant social influence. They were legally recognized as independent individuals, free to manage their own estates, conduct trade, and make decisions about their future, including whether or not to remarry. A widow, managing her late husband's successful textile business, overseeing vast agricultural lands, or engaging in international trade, was exercising considerable financial and personal agency. The joy she found in her competence, her financial security, and her ability to direct her own affairs would have been immense, a clear example of self-determined happiness derived from her independent choices. Many actively chose not to remarry, valuing their newfound autonomy over another arranged union, demonstrating a clear preference for independent living. Women also found agency and joy in their economic activities. In towns and cities, women were active participants in guilds and trades. They ran shops, brewed ale, baked bread, wove cloth, and engaged in a multitude of other professions. These women often had their own incomes, managed their own finances, and made decisions about their businesses. The pride and satisfaction derived from successful enterprise, from crafting quality goods, or from providing essential services to the community was a tangible source of self-determined joy. A woman who built a thriving business through her own ingenuity and hard work was experiencing a profound sense of accomplishment and independence. They made choices about their products, their prices, and their workforce, shaping their own economic destinies. In the legal realm, women were not entirely powerless. They could sue and be sued, particularly if they were widows or single women. All records show women bringing cases to court, defending their property rights, seeking justice for wrongs committed against them, and even engaging in complex legal disputes. The act of standing up for oneself, asserting one's rights, and achieving a favorable legal outcome would have been a powerful source of personal satisfaction and a demonstration of agency. The joy of a successful legal challenge or the security gained from legally protecting one's assets would have been deeply felt. For aristocratic women, while their marriages were often strategic, many found ways to exert influence and exercise agency within the complex political landscape. These women, like Eleanor of Aquitaine, who was not only Queen of France and Queen of England, but also a powerful duchess in her own right, wielded immense political and cultural power. She governed her vast estates, led crusades, and actively participated in political negotiations, demonstrating a remarkable capacity for leadership and independent decision-making. The joy she found in exercising her power, in shaping cultural trends, and in navigating complex political intrigues was a clear example of self-determined fulfillment on a grand scale. Her choices influenced kingdoms, and she clearly reveled in her ability to shape events. Even within religious life, women made significant choices. Becoming an abbess of a large convent meant governing a substantial institution, managing its finances, property, and spiritual welfare. Abbesses like Hildegard of Bingen or Scholastica, the sister of Saint Benedict, were powerful figures who made independent decisions regarding their communities and their spiritual direction. The joy found in leading such a community, in fostering spiritual growth, and in maintaining a center of learning and piety was a profound form of self-determined happiness. They chose a life path that put them in positions of authority and allowed them to shape their own world and the lives of those around them. The widespread practice of women making wills also illustrates their agency. By dictating how their property and possessions would be distributed after their death, women exercised control over their legacy and often made specific provisions for family members, friends, or charitable causes. This act of planning and directing their own affairs, even beyond the grave, demonstrates a strong sense of personal agency and a desire to shape their own ending, which could bring a sense of peace and satisfaction. The stubbornly held belief that medieval women were passive figures, without control over their lives or the capacity for self-determined joy, is significantly challenged by the historical evidence. The women in the Middle Ages, through their choices in marriage, their economic activities, their legal pursuits, their political influence, and their spiritual vocations, found numerous avenues to exercise agency and cultivate personal fulfillment. Their lives reveal a complex interplay of constraints and opportunities where many women actively shaped their own destinies and found genuine, self-determined joy in doing so.